As we were talking and preparing for this sermon, we were talking about our first jobs, right? And our first jobs. And my first job, I worked at a assembly plant. We built and repaired tools for telephone companies. Pretty much anything back in the 90s, early 2000s. It's all different now. But that was on like an AT&T truck. Like I never really repaired anything because I was like 16 through 20. They didn't allow me to do anything like that. But yeah, I worked there for 4 years. It was a great job. It was a great time, and I kind of fell into it. And we'll talk about that in a second. But Mark was telling me about how he got his first job because he was. Listen, I have all the respect in the world for the University of Florida. I do. Especially being from Georgia like I am. I have all the respect in the world for the University of Florida. And Mark is a University of Florida grad, and he was just finishing his freshman year, and he was like, it's time for me to get an internship. And I'm not going to be like any of my friends who are going to work in Disney, because he grew up in Orlando, and work out in the heat all day. I mean, who's going to do that? Especially Mark, because he's, a University of Florida freshman, had a 4.0 average, and he went to all these different places and looked for jobs. And did he get any of them? No, it wouldn't make a good story if it was like, first one, right? Like no, he didn't get any of them. He didn't get any of them. And he's just like, I don't want to walk around with a hot dog cart around selling Mickey-shaped hot dogs or whatever they sell at Disney now. Like, I don't want to walk with that like all the time for minimum wage, he's just like, I don't want to do that. I have good scores, and he's just wondering if it was ever going to happen for him, right? He's wondering if it was ever going to happen. And as we'll find out later, he had to ride on some coattails, right? But this is kind of how Israel was kind of thinking about things too. Like Malachi, we're in Malachi chapter 4 today. Malachi is the last prophet chronologically in the Bible. He's the last prophet that was writing, and he was writing about 400 years before Jesus started walking around on the earth, about 400 years before that. And God's people had really been through a lot by the time they get up to this prophet named Malachi. They had been in exile. They had the Assyrians and the Babylonians, these exiles. And then the king of Persia allowed them to be free. And Ezra, you've heard Ezra, he's got a book about him. Ezra, he got the temple built. They built the temple. And then they started reading God's written word again. And then Nehemiah's also got a book about him, rebuilt the wall for the protection of the city. And it further turned people back to God. But there was still nothing. Still nothing. God had not come and filled the temple again. He had not come and filled the temple. And people are like wondering, like, listen, we've done all of this. We go to UF. We have a 4.0. Why don't we have the God in the temple? Right? Like, so that's like, we are doing everything right. Why has God not done this yet? God's glory wasn't there. Maybe they did something wrong. This was the whole stance of the Pharisees. Perhaps you've heard of the Pharisees. Not big fans of Jesus, right? So the Pharisees, but this was their big thing. They said that if everyone would just get in line and do what they should, then God would come back and fill the temple. Did you guys know that? That was their big thing. That if everyone would just do what they're told, then it'd be fine, right? No one says that today. I haven't seen one Facebook post that says, if people would just get back on their knees, then God would heal the land, right? No. Nobody says that. Sarcasm, right? God was gone, and they were stuck with not going anywhere. And this is what Malachi writes to. He's writing to this yearning, this impatience from God's people. Because sometimes we get impatient too, right? We get impatient. We want work, and we want it now. Or maybe we're all super patient here. Like when your grandkids start doing something that's weird, you never call, right? Or you never complain. And you never call their mother or father, right? It's like, really, you should get Billy back on track. You guys never do that, right? Getting hushed giggles, I mean, that means no. Yeah. You never are impatient with what your family is doing. We're never impatient with what's happening in our jobs, right? We're never impatient for that next promotion, that next, whatever. We're never impatient and don't trust God on who we elect for president, right? Never. If only we could get it together and vote for that right person, then God would bless our land. No, we never say stuff like that. We have so much in common with Israel, it's not even funny. Or we could say in our own life, the struggles in my life would just go away if Jesus would just come. Jesus just come back and the struggles in my life will evaporate. Malachi is speaking to this desire, to that longing for something else, for that wanting of something else coming, that discontentment. He's speaking to that. And he says in Malachi chapter 4, verses 1 through 2, this is the last chapter of Malachi, by the way. He says, "For behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven, when all the arrogant and the evildoers will be stubble." That's a weird word to use right there, right? Stubble. "The day that is coming shall set them ablaze, says the Lord of hosts, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch. But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in its wings." I got wings right now with this robe on. "You shall go out leaping like calves in the stalls," right? God's day is coming. He will be here with you, and you shall rise up with healing in his wings. Healing in his wings. Right? That's so comforting, right? What does that mean? Healing in his wings. And let's just, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in its wings. That's weird. It's okay. You can let it be weird. All right? You can let it be weird. Those of you in Sunday school are all like, like you're just holding it in, I can tell. Because we talked about this in Sunday school earlier. But righteousness, healing in his wings. Because I've heard people talk about this before. In the newer NIV translation, it says, "Son of Righteousness was rise with healing in its rays." I guess that's connected to the sun, right? Like it kind of talks about healing in its rays. And I've heard people talk about this. I've even seen like people with T-shirts on. They're like, "Healing in its wings." And I've always, like, even since a little boy, I was like, that's an odd thing to say. I don't know what that means. All right, to understand this, we got to put our biblical glasses on. Because the people that were living 200 years before Jesus, they knew exactly what this meant. And that's what my goal is for you guys today. So, healing in his wings. 200 years ago, like they would have understood this and they wouldn't have questioned it at all. So we have to go back to Numbers chapter 15. So the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the people of Israel and tell them to make tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and to put a cord of blue on the tassel of each corner. And it shall be a tassel for you to look at and remember all the commandments of the Lord." See that phrase, tassels on the corners of the garments? That's the same phrase as wings. You guys have seen these tassels before, right? Yeah, down on the bottom. You've seen at least movies that have good Hebrews wearing with tassels on them. Those are wings. Those are wings. And so when Malachi is saying, there's Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its wings, it's saying, you should be remembering all the commands of God. And there's healing found in all of those commands of God. The Lord's commands are rising him up. The Lord has not forgotten about them. That God is promising through Malachi that he will lift them up and he will lift you up and carry you by his coattails. You hear that? But here's the thing. We normally don't like to follow people's coattails. Although Phil turned that around on me. But following someone else. But it's true. Like, my friend Mark, and the reason why I'm telling his story is that he ended up getting a job. He went out to eat with some family friends. And he was talking about how frustrated he was that no one would give a 4.0 UF freshman a job. And he's like, well, I work for Travelers Insurance. And he ended up getting him a little job. He said he called it an internship. He was all big about it. He's basically licking envelopes all summer. Yeah, like that's, Travelers Insurance internship, right? But the thing is, he never told any of his friends how he got that job. He was kind of ashamed of how he got it. Because he was riding in on the coattails. And there's a certain part of us that is like man-made, that are like, I have done this, right? I have done this. I've been successful. I have made it happen. One of our cultural prophets of the day by the name of Shia LaBeouf. No one else is laughing. Like, you guys don't know do you guys know who Shia LaBeouf is? Yeah, good, yeah. I'm being joking by saying cultural prophet. He goes, I didn't jump on anyone's coattails or ride their wave, right? Or a quote to the guy from Office Space, that's, if you could just stop riding on coattails of others, that'd be great. Never have anyone middle management tell you that. This is my favorite. This guy's name is Aziz Ansari, and he says, at the risk of bragging, one of the things I am best at is riding coattails. Because behind every successful man is me, smiling and taking partial credit. That's a very Aziz Ansari thing to say. But we usually look down on like, why don't you just make this yourself? But the truth is I've ridden on coattails so much in my life. I got my first job was from a family friend. I'm pretty sure my parents just said, hey, you're working now? Show up at this time. That's how I got my first job. And I had that job for 4 years. It was a great job. But I rode in the coattails to get it. I rode on the coattails to get here. This is my second church that I've served at. Right? Think about all the coattails that you have ridden. And there's still something deep inside of us that is like, I just don't want to do it. Like, I'm the self-made man. And we do it with our faith constantly. We don't like to appear weak at all. But here's the thing, and you're going to get this from me a lot, is that oftentimes the kingdom of heaven is the exact opposite to how our sinful nature wants to work. Because our sinful nature loves power and big things and like big monster trucks and all that. But God's riding in on like a bicycle with no gears, right? God is oftentimes going the exact opposite, and I have proof of this. Are you ready? Because I think this is about to get really cool. Do you remember the story in Luke chapter 8 about the lady with the problem of bleeding? Remember that story? Some of you are like, ho! Like you're getting it. Yeah. That. And so, like, remember her? Now, let's talk about her bleeding issue for a little bit. When I was young, I was always taught that she just had like a bleeding problem and she just bled a lot. And I was like, well, like, so she has to replace Band-Aids? Like she had some like disorder? Like, no. It was her time of the month constantly. Okay? That's what that meant. Now, here's the problem. In the Israelite religion, the Jewish religion, Hebrews, when you were on your time of the month, ladies, what did that mean for you and your relationship with God? Didn't exist, right? You had to go through ceremonial cleansings afterwards, which meant that for 12 years, she lived in a situation where she couldn't even be forgiven. She was distant and far away from God. And yet this guy who was claiming to be God, this great Messiah, was coming into her town, and she had to get through the crowd. And some of you, I imagine, are seeing where this is going. And what did she reach out and touch? The coattails, the hem of his garment, the wings. There's an even better picture right here. She reached out, you could say, for healing in his wings. Cool, huh? That phrase, when she grabs the hem of his garment, when you translate it out of Greek and put it in Hebrew and all that stuff, it's the same phrase as that healing in his wings. This woman who was completely separate from God was able to ride in healing on the coattails of Jesus. And that's the same story for us. Is that oftentimes we think we can save ourselves, but we're really just like that woman with the bleeding problem. That we just try and just nothing. I can't make this happen. But Jesus is there providing healing in his wings for us. So hopefully this means something new for you now. But he who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness, will rise with healing in his coattails, right? And we were able to grab his coattails. And he is able to bring us into his kingdom. So this is my blessing for you guys. It's my blessing. It's not about saying that you've done it. And we have to watch out for that as a church, that we don't send this message of, this is how you have to do it. You know? We may say, yeah, we're open and free to all, but sometimes people walk in and we're like, not you. Not you, right? I'm just speaking truth. Because we do that. But we need to be people about the coattails. We need to be about the coattails. Because Jesus has done it. He conquered death, sin, and the devil, and he rises out of it. And Jesus is willing to give us his coattails to ride all the way into the kingdom. And we are riding on those coattails. And I want that riding on the coattails to be our message to all of our friends and our neighbors around us. That it's not what we're doing. Like Jesus is just bringing us in. He's bringing us in. He's letting us ride in on his glory, on his salvation. It's not about deserving jobs. It's not about getting our way always. So church, ride in on those coattails. Be confident in your salvation because he has lifted you up with healing in his wings. Let's say a prayer.